com. And now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, John Vlastelica. John has been a regular contributor to ERE for many years, certainly as long as I've been here. A very great guy, very knowledgeable about a number of subjects in the recruiting world, and it's a pleasure to have him back on the show today. Today, as you all know, we're going to be discussing the various pitfalls that many of us in the recruiting industry face and how to recognize and avoid them. So I'm very pleased to have John back on the show. One of my favorite guests to have back on the program. We have a lot of stuff to cover, so I won't keep you anymore. John, thanks for being here, and let's go ahead and kick things off.
Awesome. I am really excited about this topic. Thank you, Brendan. This should be fun, guys. There's a whole bunch of you online. Thanks for coming. This is John Vlastelica. This is going to be a fun topic. It's not going to be boring. We're going to talk about the biggest mistakes I've made, the biggest mistakes I've seen as we work with corporate recruiters around the world. And a little background on me, I've spent most of my career working in recruiting, about 20 years now, and was the recruiting director at Amazon and Expedia. I get to be a judge at the ERE Recruiting Excellence Awards. But as a consultant, my team and I go into all kinds of interesting companies and do work around recruiting strategy and plans and process and do a lot of recruiter training. And I share this with you because we get to work with some great companies and we get to regularly benchmark with heads of recruiting and recruiters. And so we see firsthand while we're doing these projects what the best recruiters do better and what they do better than the rest. And so there are probably certainly more than 10 things that corporate recruiters do they could be doing better, things I could be doing better. I'm going to talk about the 10 that I have a lot of passion around. We're only going to talk about 10 because we only have an hour, and it's going to go pretty quick. My goal today is really to help you win in your job as a recruiter, as a corporate recruiter, and not trying to blow your mind today. Some of this stuff, frankly, I think you think is basic. Some of this is going to be kind of new, is going to challenge the way you think. I don't think there's anything in here that costs any money. But my goal is to keep this really, real and practical and PG-13. I will do my best not to swear since we're recording this webinar. But this is some very dense stuff. I'm very passionate about it. I packed way too much stuff in for an hour, and I appreciate that. So you can download the slides. Brendan's going to be sending out a link if he hasn't already that'll have a link. You can download all these slides. So hold on. We're going to go kind of fast. So what are we doing? We're going to talk about 10 biggest mistakes I think corporate recruiters make, and I'm going to give you some tips for how to overcome those mistakes or avoid those mistakes or some best practices you can use. We're going to start with the first one, which is really around preparation. And this is a big one. There is big opportunities for us as we go into kind of before we start to recruit to do a better job of preparing. And so I want to talk about 3 things. One of the things that I think some recruiters do that I think is a real missed opportunity is we walk into these strategy meetings with a blank sheet of paper. We ask questions like, where do you think we should post? Where have you had success hiring in the past? We ask questions, how many people do you want to have on the interview team? Who do you think would be good? And it's not that those are bad questions necessarily, but I'd rather reframe the questions and not go in with this blank sheet of paper approach. And the recruiters who I think do a really good job at this, they go in there and they're making recommendations. They're not just asking questions. The second thing is doing your research ahead of time. And I know we're super busy. Many of you on the phone have 20, 30-plus recs you carry. Where you can kind of pay me now versus pay me later, spend a little more time up front on the research side, doing some calibration profiles, get some resumes of people, past hires and people you found out on LinkedIn, grab them, take them in there, and rather than just talking generally around kind of the job description requirements, it's awesome to take in real profiles, real resumes, and have managers circle and write and comment. When I was a hands-on recruiter years ago, I used to keep, for engineering jobs, I kept this folder on my desk. It just had like, a dozen resumes that were just the different flavors of engineers, and I would use those over and over again. They were just great for this. And additionally, going in and not just saying where have we had success in the past, but actually doing a little research and figuring out where have we had success in the past. So I'm telling you, the hiring manager, this is where these hires have typically come from. These are the kind of companies they've typically come from. I know you want to get someone out of here. This is where we've typically had ROI. This is where we've typically been able to get these folks. And then on the ownership side is really making sure in these meetings that part of our preparation is going in with the mindset that managers need to own this to be successful. And that's going to be a theme you're going to hear me talk about today. And those of you that have seen me speak before are right. I love to talk about hiring manager engagement and ownership. And what I see some of the best recruiters do is they really, really help the managers understand that this is a partnership And they frame a lot of what they say in a tone that's kind of, here's how to be successful as a hiring manager. Not, how would you like to receive resumes? Would you like me to email them? Can I print them out, put them on your desk? This is really kind of reframing the conversation. And so I put in here that you guys can get off the downloaded slides. I put in here an example exercise that might be great for you to take back to your team and do. I did this both at Amazon and Expedia. And what you do is you get your recruiting team in a room and talk about what did the most successful hiring managers in your organization do differently, do better than the rest. I put some unsuccessful characteristics on here. I'm sure you guys can relate to these, kind of I'll know it when I see it types, or people expect recruiting to run everything and babysit them, and they don't think sourcing is at all part of their job, and they're constantly blaming the recruiter. Take a look at what your very best hiring managers do, and then reframe the conversation when you're doing new manager training, when you're going into these kickoff meetings, when you're doing performance management. Introduce kind of this higher bar expectation for hiring managers. The second thing is really around core assumptions that we make. And so, sorry, I'm a little fast here. We're going to miss on the ha-ha. This picture is awesome. I love this. Donkeys will eat you alive. But making assumptions is a problem I see. And so one of the opportunity areas I think we have is we, I think, sometimes assume managers are really good at recruiting, or they're good at interviewing, because they're a vice president, because they're a director, because they've been a people manager for 10 years. I do a ton of work teaching managers about sourcing and interviewing and selling and closing, not just recruiters, but hiring managers. And it's interesting to me because regardless of company, there's lots of opportunities. I think it's a poor assumption to make that your managers know how to do this stuff really well. And there's such an awesome, awesome opportunity for us to be more leaders around this and to really help teach them how to recruit, how to prep the interviewing team, how to run a good interview, how to lead around the hiring decision process, and of course, how to sell. The other thing that I see is that sometimes we kind of take managers' word that they're super busy, and we let them say things like, I'm just so busy, I've got my day job, I don't have time to help you in recruiting. And the reality is they're not helping us, we're helping them. And so one of the things that I hear is this I don't have a time thing, and when I really dig into it, what it really is they're not seeing this as a priority. It's really more of a will or a motivation issue. They may be busy. We're all busy. Hiring takes time. Garbage in, garbage out. You got to invest the time. If managers truly don't have the time, they're traveling, something's going on, I see really good recruiters forcing the manager to identify a proxy. Even if they're not busy, I always ask in the intake strategy meeting, hey, sounds like you're going to be really swamped over the next 3 weeks, or I know it took us 2 weeks just to get this meeting scheduled. Who's going to be a good proxy if I'm unable to reach you? I want to make sure we get you a quality hire really quickly. And then the last thing is assuming that managers are motivated to do this. Sometimes recruiters will use the wrong carrots or the wrong sticks to try and motivate managers. And in my experience, managers care about two things and two things only. And you really need to frame your strategy and process around those two things. The primary thing that motivates managers is hiring pain. If they're not experiencing hiring pain, if they've got a rack that's been open 3 months and they're just kind of curious about the marketplace, no pain on the team, there's no pain to them personally, their manager isn't asking them about it, they're not, the project's not at risk of slipping because of it, I just don't think they're going to be super motivated. And so what we have to do is we have to identify, is there hiring pain? And then we have to use the two things that managers care most about. They care about speed and quality, sometimes in that order. I want someone really, really quickly who's really, really good. And so when we frame our pushback, when we try and kind of get managers to do things that they're not doing, we need to talk about the consequences to speed and quality, not talk about compliance, not talk about cost. They don't care about source of hire. They don't care about even doing the right thing. And I'm being funny here, right? I'm being general when I say this, but I think this is true. Speed and quality really drive. On that note, pushback. So the third thing that I see as a mistake is sometimes we will just take what the manager asks us to do. I wish I could see you guys in person, because I don't know how many people remember watching Wonder Woman. I'm 41 years old, and I'll tell you, I'm not embarrassed to say I used to watch this show. So I loved finding this image. But pushback is a critical skill we need to have. So 3 things. One, I'm sure you guys have seen this somewhere. If you haven't, I'm so excited to be the first one to tell you about this. But when you're in that profile meeting and the manager's talking about things that are maybe unrealistic, it's really great to talk about the trade-offs we have around speed, quality, and cost. If you want someone really fast who's really good, it's going to cost you. You want someone really good who's really cheap, it's going to take forever. And if you want someone that's really fast and really cheap, it's not going to be someone very good. I'm not going to be able to get what you're looking for. One of the big mistakes I see is that recruiters sign up for trying to optimize for all of these things, and it's just not typically realistic, and we have to push back. The second thing around interviewing, where I think we have some pushback opportunities, is some of our managers, I was working with a client, I won't say the name, but they were bragging because it only took 2 interviewers to make a hire, and their bar wasn't very high. And I think to myself, wow, like that's not a great process. It's not a great process in that 2 interviewers are probably not going to have time to dig into all the things you need to predict success. It's also not a great candidate experience. Candidates, well, I don't think they want to have to meet with 10 people. I think they want to get to know some people on the job, and I think you miss out on a sales opportunity. So sometimes managers will have these ideas around interview process or interviewing techniques. I had one company that I worked with said one of their favorite techniques to test out admins was to have them sit in front of a computer and ask them to do this project for them. And their trick was they unplugged the mouse and the keyboard from the computer. And they watched this person sit there and figured out how long it took for them to realize this thing was unplugged, which I'm just like, seriously, that is the dumb ass. I mean, that is insane. Why would you do that? What do you do when they realize what's wrong? How long does it take them? 30 seconds, 60 seconds? They're clicking, nothing's happening, and you go, gotcha. I mean, that's just stupid. Very bad candidate experience. And then the third thing is timelines, and this is a big one. This is our biggest opportunity area, setting better expectations. Managers will push on us. Of course, they want something yesterday. One of the ways that I talk about this early is to talk about timeline expectations and talk about ownership and talk about the impact that they have on the timeline. This is an example of something I use in some recruiter training we do, and it's basically just a simple way to talk about process. What you'll notice on here is it's got some times on the left, give you an idea of how long it typically takes next to each process. What may be different and what maybe you haven't seen before is that this is also talking about where we have typical delays. So we say, hey, it usually takes us 2 to 4 weeks to source and screen candidates. Of course, as we find good people, we're not waiting for the end of 2 weeks or waiting for the end of 4 weeks, but that's about how long it takes for us. When it takes longer, it's typically because we're not getting feedback from you, the hiring manager. Similarly, interviewing takes 2 to 3 weeks. When it takes longer, it's typically that, again, slow feedback or your availability or your interviewing team isn't on the same page. Talking up front about the consequences, talking about the delays, will make it easier for you to push back when people are asking about unrealistic things. This is kind of your work backwards kind of deal. The other thing I see sometimes is this kind of misdiagnosis. We get asked things, and we don't dig enough. We don't really figure out what the root issue is. We don't know where this request is coming from. We just kind of accept it and run with it because we're busy and we got all these recs and all these people wanting our time. I recommend you pause and you think about where this request is coming from. I'm sure I'm not the only person that's worked with hiring managers that have some pretty big biases. Sometimes managers will really focus in on the pedigree of the person. And, they have the right to want someone out of an Ivy League school or a blue chip company, absolutely. But sometimes you dig behind that and you ask why, and you realize that they're using that as a proxy for smart. They're using it as they need someone that kind of fits in with the rest of the team, and because they're all ex-McKinsey, MBA, Ivy League folks, that's what they're looking for. And sometimes you can push on them, push on the pedigree thing, and you ask them why they need someone. What does that represent? What do you think that gets you? And you ask questions like, is it possible for someone to be successful and went to a regional state school in this kind of job? In fact, I know it is because I've gone and looked at where your team comes from on LinkedIn, and only 4 of them come from this background, and you told me she's the highest performer and whatever. The other thing is sometimes managers, of course, just keep, they want us to get them more candidates. Regardless of how good the first, second, third candidate is, they want more candidates. And it's not always that they want more candidates. Sometimes it's they don't know what they want. And one of the things you can do, we all know pre-closing candidates. If I made you an offer like this, would you be prepared to accept it? I also think it's great to pre-close hiring managers in that kickoff meeting and say, hey, if I can find you someone who's got this background, who's making this kind of salary range, who's very interested in this kind of work, would you hire that person, yes or no? And push on them and get to the point where they say, yes, if you found me someone like this who's got that and is willing to do this, I'd hire him. And then reference that conversation when they're asking for more. Some managers just want to see more just because they can. And frankly, there's no consequences. It doesn't cost them anything to have you run around and find more candidates. It doesn't take up any more of their time. And so it takes up lots of our time. There's no consequences to them to make a request like that. And the third thing is kind of the report request. And I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek, but you know what? When managers are asking you for a lot of detailed reports about their activity, they actually hate reports. They're not asking that. It's maybe they've lost confidence. Maybe they're under pressure. You have to really, really push on what's behind the report request. And I put a little example kind of walk through here that, someone will say, hey, I need a report showing everything you've done for me in the last 3 weeks. Why? Because I need to know how many candidates you have in our pipeline. Why? Because I'm concerned we're not going to be able to hit this big project. I got to get this thing staffed by mid-June. And then you flip into really getting what's behind this request, and you realize we're not tracking against the June hire, and there's some things we can be doing differently. I'd like to hear from you what you think is kind of going wrong, so I want to make sure we're aligned on this, and then they tell you some things. And then you change the conversation to, hey, would you be willing to change your strategy, your approach, and partner with me by doing some of these kind of things? Because I think I can get someone hired for you in the next 6 weeks if we can do this. And then you kind of revisit, do we really need a report? Because I could be spending my time one of two ways, getting you great candidates, or I could be spending time getting reports done. I'm going to talk about reports and data here a little more here in a minute, but for hiring managers, my experience is 9 times out of 10 when they're asking you for reports, when they start micromanaging you, it's not that they want the report. It's that they're lacking confidence we're going to hit some deliverable. And if we haven't done a good job of setting timeline expectations, if we haven't built a good strategy, I completely appreciate where they're coming from. The next thing, number 5, I want to talk about is confrontation. And this is really a skill. It's kind of a learned skill. Some of the best recruiters I've worked with, they're just great. They're great at kind of, it's not just pushback, but confronting bad behaviors and repositioning kind of the role of the manager in the conversation. And so one of the things that I think about, the way I think about hiring managers, is that hiring managers are not actually our customer. I actually don't think of hiring managers as our customer. And I don't know if any of you heard me share this story before, but when I started off in HR, 1992, 1993, about a year out of college in 93, I went through this training called Total Quality Management Training, TQM. And it was 2 days, and our VP of HR, who I called Flip Chart Kathy, because she would stand up there to flip chart, she was teaching us about service excellence, and it's kind of cool. We got a new CEO at our company. He was a Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award winner, came out of FedEx, and he was really driving this quality initiative. And I'm a year out of school. I'm still kind of racing up the learning curve, learning my craft as an HR and recruiting guy. So I'm listening to her talk, and she introduces this concept to me that back then was really new to me and new to a lot of people at our company, and that was the concept of an internal customer. And she had said, hey, in recruiting and HR, we are the supplier. We are the supplier, and our customers are hiring managers and employees. And that's how you got to think about your job. And I took that philosophy with me for about the first 8, 9 years of my career, and that's how I thought about the hiring managers I worked with and the people managers I worked with was, you guys are my customer, and my job is to get really good ratings on my customer reviews, and my job is to make you happy. And guess what? Sometimes managers don't even know what they want, or they say they want this, but they need that. Sometimes my goal, in fact now, the way I think about it, my goal is not really just to make them happy. It'd be great if they're happy, but I'd rather have them be successful than happy. And I'm sure if we open up the lines, you guys could give 1,000 examples of managers who have asked you to do things that do not have high ROI, that are not good ideas. And there's a piece of us, many of us in recruiting, who have this people-pleasing customer service orientation. And you know what? I love that. We should have good kind of customer focus as part of our job. But I would love for us to reposition the conversation and think about, is this going to help this manager be successful as a hiring manager? Are we going to get the hire that we need based on this kind of activity, based on this kind of work? Are we going to get that? Or am I just kind of checking the box to make them happy, knowing it's not going to work? The best recruiters I've worked with have the respect of the business, and the business actually appreciates when we can push back, when we can challenge them, when we bring a level of expertise that says, let me help you be successful as a hiring manager. The second thing is getting emotion out of the deal. It's really challenging sometimes in confrontation. Your heart's racing, and you have to say something. Sometimes the manager is a vice president, and you're a mid-level recruiter. One of the things that I found some success with is taking emotion out of it and let the data speak for itself. When I was at Amazon early in my career in the late 90s, I was a senior manager of recruiting, and I had to go in and drive some conversations, and I knew people were going to not be happy about it, and I was trying to figure out how to do this, and the first time I did this, I went in, and I couldn't help but make people feel defensive. The way I was framing everything, it just felt like I was attacking. I didn't mean to attack, but I was trying to point things out, and I really didn't know how to do it. And I got some advice from someone, and they said, you know what, John, I think your best bet's going to be just to present the data. And so what I did is I took a look at the offer to hire close ratio. I took a look at the funnel metrics, interview to hire. I took a look at some candidate experience feedback we were getting. I took a look at the number of referrals coming out of different groups. And on one sheet of paper, I listed all of the direct reports to the executive I supported, and I put their numbers up, right, up against their peers. And over time, I evolved it into some targets we set, different targets for different groups, some kind of minimum targets we should have, and then some things that were specific to the groups. That really helped me kind of get out of my fear of kind of confronting, because the data didn't lie. It was real data. I could go back, and if you want to know who the 18 people made offers to and the 14 that said yes, I can tell you their names. This isn't kind of estimates. This is real stuff. And the third thing is really being comfortable with upfront expectations. It's not as scary to confront if you've already talked about what the consequences might be. To me, there's nothing scary about a confrontation than going into a situation where you know you're going to completely blindside this hiring manager. They have no idea this is coming. And it's scary for you because you want to go in and you want to be a good partner. You know, I have a relationship with this person. I have to continue to work with this person. I don't get to fire my clients as a corporate recruiter. And so one of the ways you do this is you have some SLA conversations where you talk about your expectations of them, their expectations of you, the roles, the goals, the process. I'm going to revisit something I showed you guys here because I think this is really powerful. And this document I shared, or this little way of thinking about the timeline, one of the ways that we should be talking to managers about the process and doing little confrontations, if you will, is to talk about the impacts in terms that resonate with them. And as I said earlier, managers really care about, two things when they're in pain. They care about the speed and they care about the quality. And so in this example, you can see maybe, in this fake example, maybe because we weren't able to get feedback fast enough, the time that it took for us to do the sourcing and screening took 6 weeks instead of 2 to 4 weeks. And based on some availability issue, we're now looking at 4 to 5 weeks for something that should be taking 2 to 3 weeks. And then you talk about the things they can do and I can do to help speed this up. When you talk about speed and you talk about the impact that their behaviors, their activities, their timeliness has on speed and quality, it's phenomenal, guys. It's freeing because that is the motivator, or probably the motivator of that. Let's talk about Donnie and Marie. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember the Donnie and Marie show, but I will share something. I don't know why I share this, but when I was 7 years old, I lived in Portland, Oregon, and I was so upset with my mom. She was trying to make me finish my dinner, and I forgot what she was having me eat, but it was probably peas. I hate peas. And so she's trying to get me to eat peas, and she said if I didn't eat peas, she wasn't going to let me watch the Donnie and Marie show. And I was so upset, I threatened to actually run away. And I remember I packed my bag and went to the door, and I have one of those really cool moms who, rather than coming and saving me, said, honey, it's a little cold this time of year, so make sure you take a jacket, okay? Oh, my God. Anyway, so I'm kind of scarred for life with Donnie and Marie. But Donnie and Marie, a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll, if you all might remember this. One of the things that I see some recruiters struggle with is kind of building the internal relationships, building the partnerships within your organization with other parts of HR, other parts of the organization. One of the things that I think is a phenomenal partnership for you to have, a really important one, is finance. Making sure that you have good two-way communication with finance. When I headed up global recruiting at Expedia, one of the procurement people in the finance organization had come to me and shut my door and said, hey, I don't think you know about this yet, but I want to give you a heads up. I just signed a massive contract in the Czech Republic for something big that we're going to do, and I don't think they've engaged you. Do you know about this? And I said, no, I haven't heard about this. He goes, well, we're signing leases, we're doing all kinds of stuff, and so I just wanted to give you a heads up. That is phenomenal. I didn't hear that from my HR partner. I heard that from the finance organization, and I was really good about partnering with them, making sure my team was giving them information they needed. They also helped me out a lot when I had that kind of relationship. Whenever I was going to report on information to the executive team, I would love to have one of the finance partners give me some feedback on what my content looked like. Everything from how I formatted to how I footnoted to the terms I used, trying to translate some of my HR and recruiting speak into finance speak, knowing that executives are used to looking at, plan or actual versus plan or actual versus goal and talking, year over year, and just the ways that I'd set stuff up. Sometimes I had 80, 90% of it right, but they would come in and help me so much by giving me feedback that allowed me to be more credible and, frankly, sped up the conversation. It allowed me to have more time to focus on the kind of qualitative conversation I wanted to have and less time in trying to have, get the leaders to interpret kind of how I set up a spreadsheet or something. The second group that we all love, compensation, the compensation team. So one of the things that I see, I was just in an organization out east a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about this in some recruiting leadership training we were doing. And it's interesting because compensation, I actually worked as a compensation analyst for 3 months. My first HR job out of college was that. It wasn't a good fit. I didn't want to do it. It was a temp job, someone on maternity leave. But I really began to appreciate now as a recruiting leader just the challenge the compensation team has. One of the things I see recruiters do in partnership with compensation, and recruiting managers do this, is really to make sure we're well aligned on the principles around comp. I don't just mean like the concept of total comp. I mean the actual principles of when are the times when we go above and beyond? What is the criteria that you use in compensation when we approve an out-of-range offer? What is the criteria you use? Because me as a recruiter on the front lines having a better sense of that criteria actually arms me with information so that when a hiring manager wants me to do something, or frankly when I'm tempted to do something, I know in advance whether or not it's likely to happen or not. I have a better sense. I can push back in the moment and not make it us, hiring manager and I want to talk to you in comp and you guys are telling us no. I want to make sure I'm a good partner to my HR partners in compensations. So I don't want to just send kind of emails to you and fill out comp exception forms and have you, decline them. I really want to understand more around what process you use to approve things. And ideally, I want to develop the trust with you so that you can say, hey, here's kind of the guidelines we use. And I am actually comfortable, John, if you want to go above or beyond kind of this area in this kind of situation, I actually don't need you to come and check in with me. I will trust that if these things are true, if this person has a giant relocation bonus they have to repay, you can change the sign-on bonus from this to this. I'm comfortable. But at some point, you meet a threshold where you need to get me involved. That, to me, is awesome, guys. If you're not there with your comp team, it'd be a phenomenal conversation to talk about what are the principles, can we get some pre-approvals on some things, not just get decisions. Teach us to fish a little bit on this. The other thing that compensation teams have told me that they get frustrated by with us, and I think creates friction between us and comp, is that we have to show them that we are phenomenally good at non-comp selling. Everyone on this phone, everyone who's on this webinar, I'm sure is great at selling your company and your culture and the job and the team and the opportunity, the work, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes the compensation team thinks we're lazy and that we just go to compensation right away. I don't mean go to them, but we go to money. We'll throw more money at it. And they're thinking, well, of course if you throw more money on it, your job's going to be easy. Part of what I think we can do is from a credibility standpoint, from an influence standpoint, is to spend some time working with compensation. A lot of compensation teams have rebranded themselves as total rewards groups, and they're thinking more broadly just about cash pay anyways. But going in and sharing with them some of the work we've done to develop or to build on our employee value prop and talk about our recruitment messaging and talk about the kind of training maybe we give, or have a recruiter demonstrate kind of a closing pitch for them. Get them comfortable that we really are selling things more than just money, because what they hear from us, the only time we really interact with them typically is when we're asking for something, we're asking for more. And of course they're concerned, along with the HR generalists, about internal equity. They're concerned about budget concerns. This is an opportunity for us to partner with them better. The third group is really the big group, and that's really the HR business partner or the HR generalist. And this is where I think we have an opportunity to try and create some shared success, some real winning opportunities for them and us. One of the things that I've learned about HR business partners, some of them are treat staffing like it's a second-class kind of occupation, and you should aspire to be an HR generalist, an HR business partner. I think that one of our opportunities, though, is as recruiting leaders, is to recognize that the HR business partner absolutely does write checks that we have to cash. They are often in meetings with other leaders in our business leaders, and they will get asked questions about staffing. They'll get asked questions about recruiting around major initiatives, projects, and sometimes they're put on the spot and they need to give a response. And if we're not in sync with them, we really run a sorry, I'm seeing notes here saying I'm breaking up a little bit. Apologize for that, guys.
Hearing you come through okay now, John. It was a little garbled before, but it sounds okay now to me.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, guys. So one of the opportunities we have is to make sure that our HR business partners understand what our priorities are, understand that we've been listening to our partners and hiring managers, and make sure that they're in the loop. And one of the ways to kind of get HR BPs, if you have someone who's not sharing a lot with you, is to make sure you include them. You have to give to get. You have to, find ways to deliver value to them so that if they're put in a position where they need to talk about our function, they need to talk about recruiting, that they are in a position to talk about that with credibility and in a way that comes off more as one HR, much more aligned. And the third thing kind of on that HR business partner kind of generalist thing is escalation paths. I was working with REI, a big retail company, several years ago, and one of the things we were doing is working with the recruiting team and then talking to the HR generalists about recruiting. And one of the things we recognized is that we had some kind of natural things that got escalated within the organization. They're just typical things that I'm sure you can all relate to where, a hiring manager comes to you as a recruiter and says, hey, we're not finding the level of talent I want for this job. I want to take the job level up from a manager to a director. And that, of course, requires some, comp may need to approve that, or, maybe the HRBP needs to approve that, or maybe it's a vice president level, maybe that leader's boss, maybe the executive has to approve, change manager to director. One of the things that I recommend you do, and I put a little example of this here for you, is think about what are the typical escalation paths within HR? What are the typical escalation paths? Where do things come from? What are the issues? Who are they typically escalated by? Why are they typically escalated? Where does it typically go to, but who should it go to? Sometimes it gets escalated to a recruiting manager and it should be handled at the recruiter level. Sometimes it gets escalated to the HR business partner, but it should be going to the recruiter. Sometimes it comes to the recruiter, but it should really be the HR generalist who gets it. So think about 4, 5, 6 issues, and this is a great exercise to do with your HR business partners and say, hey, let's talk about the kind of things, the kind of noise you guys hear, the kind of escalations you guys hear, and let's talk about as a team where these come from, where they should be going, how we resolve these kinds of things, and then ultimately who's accountable for resolving these things, kind of where the buck stops. This is a great exercise to do, and it takes you, maybe a couple hours, and it can be really helpful, especially if you are in a dynamic organization where you've got reorgs happening and HR generalists moving in and out of jobs, or if you're scaling up your recruiting organization. Next thing I want to talk about is data. It's capturing kind of your own data. And one of the things, I like many of you, and thank you, Taleo, for being a sponsor, we cannot always depend on our ATS to provide the kind of information we need to do our jobs, and that we need to do to not only do our jobs, but to really help people see the value that we create for the organization. And so one of the mistakes that I see sometimes is that recruiters out there they're depending too much on other people's kind of data, other people's reports on their work, on their activity, or they're just depending on the ATS reports. And it kills me to say this because I am a huge fan of having one authoritative system where everything lives. And I just don't see that working at scale. I don't see even companies that have invested, hundreds of thousands of dollars in systems. There's some basic information that I still think, I can't believe I'm saying this, I still think you need to manually track on your own. So let me talk about a couple of these things here. One of them, just general, is we need to be showing our work. However we show it, however we get it, we need to be showing our work. We need to do the work and show the work. One of the biggest disconnects I see between, kind of one of the differentiators, I should say, I see between mid-level recruiters and senior recruiters is senior recruiters understand, and I don't mean politics here, but they know you need to do the work and you need to show the work. It's just smart for your career. I don't mean running around asking people to high-five you every time you make a hire, but I do mean that it is important. It's an important part of our job to be able to demonstrate to the business the value that we're creating. And you need to personally own it. You cannot be this passive, our ATS sucks kind of recruiter. I can't get that data out of there. If you can't get it out, own it. And when you show your work, when you show your wins, think about the wins more broadly. Think about the wins beyond just your own win of filling the job. Think about the role maybe a sourcer played. Maybe it's an external vendor. Maybe it's the HR business partner was involved. Maybe the coordinator on your team who scheduled things, or the admin. Definitely the hiring manager. If you have an opportunity to recognize other people on the team, take it every single time. You are positioned as so much more of a leader when you are out there recognizing other people. That's one of the things that leaders do. And it's one of the most important things that I think you can do as a recruiter to elevate your role, elevate your standing in the organization, is recognition. tell you guys a quick story real quick on this. So when I was at Amazon back in 2005, it was just before performance review time, and I was thinking about how many great people had been helping us throughout the year. Beyond the great stuff that my team had accomplished, I was thinking specifically about some of the hiring managers and some of the individual engineers and other people who just really stepped up. And I thought, you know, performance reviews are coming up. I know in our performance review process, we don't explicitly call out recruiting success for hiring managers. I'd love to get that in there. But I thought, you know, I'm going to take a look at all the people that made an employee referral that got hired. I'm going to take a look at all the people that my recruiters and coordinators are telling me, you know, when we have someone no-show for, excuse me, when we have someone no-show for an interview, there are those people that you can call on who will kind of drop what they're doing and help you out. There's not a lot of them, but there's a few of them. There's also people that are, you know, great at doing college presentations, or people that are phenomenally good at kind of telling our story that can be closers. You know, we're trying to relocate this person from Salt Lake City to Seattle, and you came from Salt Lake City, and, you know, you get on the phone and you'll talk to them about how you like Seattle or whatever. Part of what I did is I simply sat down, took me several hours to do this, and wrote a thank you email to the employee and to their boss. And I said, hey, I just really want to recognize all the great work Jeremy has done in this last year. I don't know if you realize this, but Jeremy has made 3 referrals. 2 of them got hired into your group. 1 of them got hired into Charlie's group. He has been our go-to guy as an interviewer. We've had people bail on us. He's presented at 3 campuses. He's a phenomenal resource to the organization as a whole, not just recruiting. I just wanted to say a big thank you. I did not say, please write this in his performance review, but guess what happened? If you send something like that out a week or 2 before performance reviews, it will go right into the performance review. And funny story, Jeremy comes down to my office, great guy, comes down to my office, you know, 2 weeks pass, he comes down, how you doing, John? And he goes, hey, you know, thanks a lot. And I'm like, what do you mean thanks a lot? You know, I think you're awesome. You sound sarcastic. What do you mean? He's like, yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for what? You're an awesome guy. We count on you. You're our go-to guy. You do amazing stuff. I really appreciate all the hard work you do. Yeah, thanks to you, my boss has now set goals for me around recruiting. I'm doing your frickin' job. He goes, you know, I made 3 referrals. He wants to see if I can get 6. You know, he wants to know if I can do 5 campus presentations this year. So I, of course, am just cracking up, and he is looking at me with this, you know, sideways smile. But I loved it. I mean, I'm like, oh, my God, this is fantastic. I'm getting goals around recruitment into engineer and hiring manager performance reviews. This is fantastic. So anyways, that's a quick little story, but showing the work, showing the wins, and acknowledging the wins of others is a big part of what I think great recruiters do, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do little thank yous. The second thing is around tracking data, and I put a list of some things on here that I think are pretty important. This is important for something we're going to talk about, number 10 thing here in a minute. This is really important, though, for you to be able to be effective as a recruiter and for you to be able to demonstrate your value to the organization. There are some of you that have CRM tools. Some of you have ATSs where you can do some pipeline reporting really well. Pipelining is kind of interesting because there's not always an easy way to pull out the companies that these people work for or how well they fit your profile. Some of you have pre-employment tests and other things you can talk about your pipeline, but a lot of people, they talk about numbers, number of applicants or number of people they've screened. It's really great if you can demonstrate at some point in these conversations you have with hiring managers and with executives what the quality of your pipeline looks like. Looking at funnel ratios, I think is interesting. That can be challenging to get out of some systems. Looking at the profiles of the people you've hired, I highly recommend, I know this is manual, I highly recommend that you keep some kind of simple spreadsheet that shows all of the people that you've personally hired, and you update it, you know, once a week, once a month, and put the names of the people in there, put the last 2 companies they worked for, put the schools they went to, put the geographies they've worked, put the job titles they've had. Put something in there if you know they belong to an association or they're a popular blogger or they got some really high rating on, you know, some Stack Overflow, some, you know, tech site or something. Anything you can that's not recreating their whole resume, but put it in a way so that you can search through this, either in an Access database, but real simply just in an Excel doc. And one of the great things you can do with this is when you're building your sourcing strategy, just off the top of your head, you should be able to go into something like this, pull it out, and identify sources for referrals, you know, solicit referrals from people that come out of that geography, come out of that industry, come out of that company, people that are from that school, or when you're doing campus recruiting. It's just a nice, simple way to do it. It also allows you to talk with credibility about the kind of people that you're actually hiring for the business. And you can talk about, you know, number of hires you're getting out of competitors, for example.
putting time to fill information in there. You get time to fill out of your ATS. I think it's interesting to see average time to fill. I think it's more interesting for you to track time to fill for those really critical hires. Those are the hires that the business cares most about. And when you can show some improvement in time to fill for jobs that the business cares a lot about, I think you're actually showing much more value back to the business.
There's some other things in here too, decline reasons. A lot of systems have generic decline codes, and oftentimes, candidates will tell you one thing and it was really another. There's a lot of relocation issues that could have been solved with a better relocation package, and then so they'll say it was kind of a relocation issue, but it was really maybe a compensation issue. Tracking the real decline reasons, I think, is phenomenal. And then compensation intelligence. I was working with a company that basically recruiting said we're getting killed in the marketplace. I'm sure some of you are experiencing this. The market has heated up. I'm seeing in some technology companies we work with almost 1999 like kind of behaviors out there, giant sign-on bonuses, all this stuff. This client of ours is really having a hard time competing on comp. They'd kept compensation ranges flat. They kept the levels flat for several years. They weren't paying out bonuses, and all of a sudden the economy's turning, and they're not ready. Other companies are kicking their butts. And what's interesting, and I'm sure some of you have seen this, or if you haven't, I'm excited to be the one to share this with you, is sometimes that problem doesn't show up where you think it's going to show up. And what I mean by that is that this company was trying to make an argument back to the compensation team that we had these compensation problems. We need to offer more sign-ons, more base salaries, richer reload packages, all these kinds of things. And the compensation team was asking them, well, what's your offer to hire close rate? And this company had an offer to hire close rate in the 90-some% range. And the compensation team says, well, we don't expect you to close 100% of your offers, and what percentage of those were due to comp? And the recruiting team is like, well, only a few percentage points was directly tied to comp, but this is a real problem. They're like, we don't see the problem. Of course, the opportunity here is to track compensation issues earlier in the process. So what wasn't happening, or let me reframe that, what good recruiters do is early in the phone interview process, you're going to screen people out. If you're not a comp match, you're not even going to get to the altar to do the I do thing. You're not even get to the offer stage, right? You're going to screen those people out because they're making 120 and we can't go higher than 90. The best person on the team makes 85, and there's just no way we're going to go that high. And so you screen them out or you redirect them to a different job. Those things don't show up very often in ATS reports. And that's really some of the data that, frankly, the intelligence that you have as a recruiting organization that can really influence compensation, but you need to have data. You can't, and data and stories, but it can't just be stories. So doing a little compensation intelligence, I actually hired a firm out of North Carolina for me to do some real-time comp intel, where I hired these guys to go target 3 companies that we've been saying in recruiting that we're having a hard time extracting people out of here because of comp. And we actually had this firm go out and play the role of a recruiting firm and just purely get copies of offer letters and all kinds of information about their current compensation and what they were looking for, and use that. It wasn't a huge sample size, but it was a big enough sample size, and it was real people that were able to actually show resumes. This is what someone like this makes. And from these companies that you say you want to get people out of, and then it just kind of reinforced because we had another firm do it. Didn't cost a lot of money, something to think about. The third thing on here is the voice of the customer, and one of the things I think that makes our jobs great is when we get wins for the business. Every once in a while, you'll have a hiring leader, an executive acknowledge your great work, and I think it's important for you to always be soliciting feedback from the business, not in a "are you happy customer" kind of way, but am I delivering the kind of value that you need to see out of the recruiting organization based on kind of what we agreed. My role is, your role is kind of stuff. But going out there and getting feedback, both from your hiring managers that you support, as well as the candidates, is phenomenal. And if you're afraid of getting it now because you think it's not going to be great, maybe your rec loads are way too high, you haven't been able to deliver the kind of service you want, I'll tell you now is the perfect time to capture some of this. It's the perfect time to go out and baseline it, because what you're going to want to do is show over the next several months how you've improved. It's very hard. Some people want to wait till the end after they've already fixed everything to go measure it. They're afraid to measure it now. So part of the opportunity, I think, for us is go measure what it is today, even if you're a little afraid to see it. It doesn't mean you have to share it with anyone, but go measure it today, and then look at where you're getting feedback, and then demonstrate in 3 months or 6 months, you and your manager demonstrate the kind of improvements you're making. And then when you do make that improvement, try and get some testimonials around that. And it's just very good for your career to solicit testimonials. Your boss may do this around performance review time on your behalf, asking for feedback from the hiring manager you support. It's great to get your own. And I recommend you just set up a little Outlook email folder and just drag some of those things in there. Number 8, rec filler. One of the opportunities I think we have, and this is interesting, is to not think of our jobs as just putting butts in seats. And I think sometimes, I don't know that we think of ourselves this way, but sometimes it's frustrating because we get in this mode where our job is just to bring external candidates in the organization. And I'll tell you something interesting. I had a real change of heart several years ago. I realized I was telling my team and I was telling the business, we fill external recs. We bring external talent into this organization. That is, I've got headhunter types on my team. That is what we do. It's what we do best. And what I realized is I was squeezing myself out of some really interesting conversations. I don't know that it's realistic for us to go back to the business and talk about all the internal opportunities, filling this job internally and consultant opportunities. Maybe you could bring in some experts in this space and maybe even thinking about outsourcing it. But if you want to be a real talent partner, if you want to go back to the business and have more senior level conversations, we need to recognize as recruiters that we're not the only option. Not only are we not the only option, they may go to a search firm, which isn't the end of the world, but we're not the only option in that, putting a traditional FTE button seat from the outside is not the only option. And at a minimum, I started to rethink of my role as I wanted to understand the complete talent pool available. And at first, I kind of brought internals back into my fold and said, hey, I need to be thinking about this. I need to partner with the talent management, succession management folks. I need to understand that. I also need to have a way to better understand the own talent in my organization. I need the recruiters on my team to be having conversations that are a little different with hiring managers to understand what the options are and make suggestions even around some internal hires. Sometimes you get those purple squirrel, impossible to find external hires, and you realize, boy, it's unlikely we're going to find someone on the outside that has all this. What if we gave this opportunity to an internal person as a development opportunity? So internals are great, but also thinking about consultants and temps. Sometimes the skill set they have that they need, they only need for 6 months, and maybe a consultant is actually a smarter move, even if it's more expensive. And of course, not many of us get exposure to this, but sometimes, especially with technology groups, call center, other kind of, some jobs, you can just outsource them. Maybe we shouldn't be hiring security people for our front desk and our lobby. Maybe we should just outsource that. Why are we doing that? Why are we hiring cooks for our kitchen? Is that really the business we're in? Sometimes we make recommendations to kind of go beyond the traditional. Number 9 of number 10 is really strategery. This is a big opportunity area for us. And I think one of the biggest problems I've seen, one of the big mistakes we make, is that we as recruiters, our primary strategy sometimes can be to try harder. And I'll tell you, try harder, run faster is not a strategy. It's just not. And we take on more and more and more. And it's just not enough. It's not enough to look someone in the eyes and say, well, I'm super slammed. I'm going to do my best. I'll see what I can get done. I really think that's a missed opportunity. I think it's a missed opportunity around expectation setting, and I think our credibility goes in the toilet. I think when we take on stuff and say yes to stuff that we know we can't do, I think the managers sense that, the managers see it, they experience it. It hurts our credibility. It's much better to push back. But try harder is not a strategy. What you want to do, of course, is you want to have a plan. And if your strategy doesn't have numbers or timelines, it's not a strategy. If your strategy is we're going to double down on employer referrals and we're going to do behavioral interview training and, okay, then, whatever, you really need to have a strategy with numbers and timelines. And you can't just keep doing the old stuff and expect different results. I know that's super obvious. Having said that, though, there is no shame in low-hanging fruit. And one of the things that I'm sure all of you have seen, as I've seen the last couple of years, is some recruiters get really attracted to the shiny object. They hear about some new thing that's come out, and they spend an inappropriate amount of time kind of digging into it. Doesn't mean we don't want innovation, guys. We absolutely need to be trying new things. Absolutely, we should be experimenting. But to set expectations with a manager that our primary strategy is going to be for something that isn't tried or true, I think that's a risk. And I think that what they want to make sure is that we're not just off doing some trivial pursuit, but we get ROI. We get the concept of ROI, and we know what works. And I honestly don't believe when you're building a strategy that hiring managers even care about the source. If you're hiring someone really good, really fast, to them, they don't care. When they care is when they're losing confidence in our abilities typically. And so this is an opportunity for us to demonstrate ROI. And then I said this earlier, but showing the work, this is a big part of strategy. It's important not just to go run off, do a strategy, and then pop back up in 6 weeks and say, well, we made it, or sorry, we missed it, but doing some actual versus plan reporting along the way, keeping the business in the loop, using a basic red, yellow, green status report. And when you're done with something, whether it was a success or not, one of the great ways that we control our internal brand, our reputation as a recruiting function or as a recruiter, is to do a post-mortem, is to pull all the people that were involved in the strategy together in a room, 15 minutes, or get on the phone, and just talk about what we learned, what turned out to be really high ROI, low ROI, obstacles we hit. This is a great leadership opportunity for us as recruiters, and I think it's something that's often missed. The last one I want to talk about is really creating our before and after story, like this guy. I want to look like the guy on the right. I look like the guy on the left now. But create a great before and after story. And this is, you guys, really about your careers as recruiters. And I'll tell you, I've interviewed I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of recruiters and recruiting managers over the years in my 20 years in this business. And I'll tell you, when I'm talking to a recruiter, I want more than just someone who's filled recs. It's awesome to hear about the critical roles you filled. It's awesome. But I'll tell you, even though this is sometimes counter, especially if you're just phenomenal at sourcing, it's like, I don't want to do projects. You need to do projects. It's important for your resume. It's important that you're somehow involved at some point in your career in doing some technology evaluation or implementation. You're involved in some big sourcing projects. Even if you're a full-cycle recruiter and you don't have time to do a lot of sourcing, you need to be involved in sourcing somehow, because that's really one of the core things we deliver. It's the core thing I think we deliver. And where you can be involved in bringing competitive intel back to the business, I think it's phenomenal. If you can give an example, one of my clients had an example of someone that identified a different market. They were having a lot of challenges recruiting for this one type of skill set in the market they were in, and they actually did some research out there, some labor market studies and some other things, and decided they would have a much easier time and they would get much better quality if they actually relocated this operation out of kind of the Northeast down to the Southeast. And this was phenomenal. I mean, I'm just thinking, like, God, if I was interviewing this recruiter and you were the one that drove this, you were the one that initiated this, what a phenomenal, you're so attractive to me as a candidate, right? That's just fantastic. The second thing is leaving behind new capabilities, making sure that you demonstrate how you've been more than just kind of getting the job done, but above and beyond. Maybe you're a coach, a mentor to more junior recruiters. Maybe you're a trainer. Maybe you co-facilitate interview training. Maybe you do brown bags with hiring managers on how to optimize their LinkedIn profiles. Maybe you built some tools or templates or interview guides or something for the managers. And then the third thing is when you can projectize things, I don't think that's a word, but when you can take things that are just beyond your I fill 8 jobs a month kind of stuff and package them together and connect it to something bigger. Maybe there's a new product that's going to launch. Maybe there's a new geography you're going into. Even if it's the same kind of jobs you've been recruiting for all the time, it's good for your career to package that, is to say, I was part of the team that helped to launch our new Czech Republic operation, or I was part of the team that helped to get us out of hardware and get us into the software business, or launch our consulting line, or open up that new hospital, or whatever it might be. Even if it's the same kind of stuff, it's important for your career that you connect it to something. Obviously, it's important just for your own motivation, too. And so think about what your next interview is going to look like. I have been talking 100 miles an hour, guys. We've covered a lot of ground. My goal was that this wasn't boring and didn't suck, and we kept it practical. And I hope that you got a few things out of this that you think you can take back and use. I love recruiting. I mean, I'm a diehard recruiter. I love our profession. I love what we do. I think we do amazing work. I think we build companies. I think the stuff we do is just fantastic. And I think it's not rocket science, but we get really busy, and sometimes we fall into old patterns of behavior, or we just walk into potholes. And what I want to do is try and keep us kind of focused on the right things, avoid those potholes. I've stepped in every one of these that I've talked about. Hope you guys got some good stuff out of this. Because we're tight on time, and I admit I packed way too much into this, I've got a couple things for you. So one, Brendan has been sending out emails and some chat stuff. Yes, you can get the slides. You can go to the website that's on the screen here. It says want PDF of slides. That's just my website, recruitingtoolbox.com. You can go to the downloads attendee section. Use the password winning. Go Charlie Sheen, and you can download a full PDF of these slides. The other thing is, because we don't have time to do Q&A, continue the conversation. I actually set up a group discussion this morning out on the LinkedIn ERE.net group. So if you go to LinkedIn, search your groups, Many of you are probably already members of ERE.net. There's thousands of people that are. I started a bit of a discussion out there. I certainly did not cover everything. I don't have a corner on the market on best practices. I would love if you'd go out there, add to the conversation, ask some questions. I'll be checking it out. I'm traveling this week doing client work in the Bay Area. I'm based in Seattle. But I'll be going on there over the next several days and jumping in as well. And then, of course, I'd love to connect with you. I put my LinkedIn profile up there. There's some events I'm going to be at. Thanks so much for your time, guys, and I'll turn it back over to you, Brendan.
John, thank you so much. Fantastic information as always, and it certainly did not suck, as you brought up before. Thanks again, and I'm sorry we don't have time for Q&A today, but as John brought up, we do have a LinkedIn discussion group, and you can find that link in the chat room on the lower left. I've also sent out an email about an hour ago with all that information, as well as where you can download the slides, find a recording as of tomorrow, and access the HRCI information. I would also like to thank Taleo for sponsoring today's webinar. We wouldn't have been able to put this on without them. And John, any closing thoughts before we wrap up for the day?
You know what? I am amazing. It is exactly 3 o'clock Eastern and noon.
Very punctual.
Pacific time. But I did not get a chance to practice this before I did this, guys. So I'm just smiling right now because I'm impressed I didn't go over by 10 minutes. So no, I had a great time. I would have loved to have been in person with everyone in the room. So you know, it's a webinar though. There you go. But I had a great time. Hope you guys got a lot out of it, and I appreciate the opportunity, Brendan.
And thank you, John, for joining us today and sharing all your wisdom with us. Thanks to all of you for taking the time to join us today as well. I hope you got a lot out of it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at Brendan, which is BRENDAN at ERE.net, and I'd be happy to help with any questions you might have. And I believe that is it for the day. I hope you have a great afternoon, and take care.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That does conclude the conference call for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your lines.